for Friday, November 15th. Uh, Welcome, everybody. We don't need a roll, do we, for attendance?
We
Brian?
traditionally do not do that, sir. No.
Okay. So we'll look at the minutes. Those of you, any comments, suggestions,
Sorry.
amendments to the minutes from the 9:24 meeting? None. Can I take a motion to accept the minutes, approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna
Anybody
abstain.
opposed?
I'm gonna just abstain because I haven't had a chance to look at them.
Okay, one abstention. Okay, we'll go to item C. I'm going to turn it over to himself, Mr. Kane, with his high school report that he's rebuffed up. And Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. And apologies. I mentioned verbosity earlier. This was me. So over the course of serving on the governor's transportation funding task force, for on behalf of you folks for the last well, I guess it's been 10 months. There's been lots and lots of discussion about sort of why things are done the way they are done now. And that got me thinking about kind of going back further and trying to figure out sort of how we got here historically. And so that led me to sort of taking a deep dive over the summer and over the fall, and with apologies to our new staff members, Hannah and Isabella, who I forced to read this thing about 9 times, just to sort of get a sense of kind of where we've come from. So basically, since 1918, there's been 25 governors, 25 secretaries of transportation, about 30 general managers, and hundreds of other trustees, directors, superintendents, super chiefs, legislators, mayors, select boards, auditors. There have been dozens of consultants' reports, commissions, committees, panels, task forces, studies, reviews, reports, evaluations, and investigations. And in reviewing all of these, some of the remedies to fix public transportation in the region that have been suggested include expansion, service cuts, fare increases, fare reductions, wage increases, wage reductions, public control, privatization, centralization, decentralization, municipal management, state management, public authority management, layoffs, hiring sprees, austerity, management rights, labor appeasement, deficit spending, forward funding, labor crackdowns, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, and a variety of other measures during all kinds of periods: depressions, recessions, wars, peace, Republicans in charge, Democrats in charge. And basically, I wanted to try to get to the bottom of sort of how we got here historically in terms of how the MBTA is financed and governed. And so I went through 106 years of history and came up with Always Broke. It was originally meant to be kind of the follow on from a report I wrote in 2009 called Born Broke, but it went in a different direction. But what I've sort of pulled out of it are sort of 9 important lessons that over the last 106 years have proved to be true. And without getting into all of them, the highlights are the fact that leadership at the top matters most. Um, it depends on strong leadership from governors and secretaries and their equivalents and board chairs, and especially general managers or their equivalents. The periods during the last century when the TIAs and its predecessors have been strongest have been when those at the top really care and take an active interest in it. While poor management harms system performance, success without continuous and consistent strong leadership is almost impossible. The second sort of big area is that public transportation is incredibly sensitive to economic conditions. So up until the 70s, the agencies were funded mostly by fare revenue. Obviously, when the economy was strong and there were more jobs, there were more fares, and obviously in times of downturn, there were less. And so that leads me to sort of suggest that to the extent possible, strong revenue sources that are counter-cyclical to economics are important. Now, there's only one of those that I've ever found in the history of the United States, and that's Birmingham, Alabama, which charges a poured beer tax to fund its transportation, which goes up when economic downturns happen. So maybe there's a lesson there. Um, the sort of biggest lesson is that debt has been a continuous problem for the agencies since 1918. The kind of original sin of public transportation in Massachusetts is that we've always loaded up the agencies with debt. When the Boston Elevated was taken over by public control, a significant amount of debt was sort of was absorbed by the Commonwealth and by the new operating entity. And that has continued to this day for the past 106 years. So it's just always been there, and we've never really grappled with it as a region, as a people. Um, Last couple of things are that reform and austerity, when we have periods of austerity, and there have been many over the course of the history of the agencies, policies that are aimed at cost cutting almost inevitably lead to reductions in service quality, staff shortages, and increased safety risks. We've seen this again and again and again, including recently. Austerity-driven approaches harm riders and the transit dependent. They don't hurt unionized employees. They don't hurt management. They don't hurt the politicians. They don't hurt folks except those that can least afford to be hurt. And I argue that the transit reforms that have been enacted this century, 2004 and 2009, have failed to achieve their stated goals of generating significant savings. And then there's a lot of time spent on tracking that and trying to prove that hypothesis. And I think I did it. The final couple of things are that sustainability, excuse me, oversight, independent oversight, like that provided by this organization and its predecessors helps, doesn't harm the process. And in the piece, I list several examples of this, including most significantly, perhaps 1983. Some of you might remember when management rights were passed. That was done directly as a result of actions taken by the MBTA advisory board at the time, under Mayor Kevin White of Boston. But there's many other examples going back in history that prove this. And I would argue that a well-resourced and knowledgeable third-party oversight entity, independent of any governor or the administration or general manager, helps and not harms the process. And finally, system expansion, which I know many people are always arguing for, tends to help society at large, tends to help the Commonwealth at large, but tends to harm the transportation operating entities because they then have to pay the additional debt service and pay the additional operating service. Green Line extension is going to cost upwards of $40 million to operate over and above fair revenue this year. For example, South Coast Rail will be an additional dozen million. And because of that, because of the benefits that these expansions bring to housing and to economic development and to our way of life and to our air quality, et cetera, those costs should probably be borne at the state and federal levels and not by the transportation agencies who are just have proven over time unable to manage the costs that come with those without significant help. So those are the kind of main lessons. And I try to apply these lessons to some challenges the T is facing. Many of you we've met with in the last few months to talk about the financial challenges. Inevitably, when the legislature does what the legislature does and tries to address this fiscal cliff, it will come with policy changes. And I'm hoping that this work will result in not repeating our past mistakes and perhaps learning some historical lessons that can result in better public policy and a better public transportation system. And so my request to the executive committee is that you accept the report. It doesn't necessarily mean you endorse every single thing in it, but it would allow me to kind of move forward with it. I've talked to many folks behind the scenes who've seen it. There's a positive reaction from almost everyone. People have asked me to turn it into an op-ed in the Globe or something, and I don't know what's going to happen with it yet, but I would like to be able to publish it, and by you folks accepting that on behalf of the advisory board, that would allow me to do that. So that is my request to you, and I'm happy to turn it back to you, sir.
Thank you, Brian. I found it fascinating. I didn't really see any major surprises, but the history is remarkable. The old saying, history repeats itself, pretty consistent with this report. But I thank you for the work on it, Brian. There was a lot of work there. And it appears that you enjoyed very much putting it together. And so anybody have any questions or comments for Brian on the report?
Um,
Go ahead, Rob.
just a quick comment. I like the sound of it. I wasn't able to review it. We hopefully get access and look at it, and I'll just be happy to comment directly to Brian on it. But I like the direction of his analysis over the past several months. So, but I did want to point out I'd like to actually look at the entire report.
Yeah,
Um,
I apologize again that the link I sent you didn't work. I'm trying to remedy that as I do it now. I put a link in the chat that should give you access. Otherwise, I'll just email the damn thing to you.
And I actually just had a minor question. The MAPC session, how does that relate to what you're doing? We got an invitation for that. Are you in that, or is that something different?
I'm not a panelist at that. I've worked very closely with Julia Wallers, who's putting that together around the revenue options. And I can also tell you that many of us on the task force have already adopted their recommendations and tried to get it into the final product.
Okay. Yeah, I would suggest, yeah. So are you going to be able to send it to her? Is she going to have knowledge of your report at that session, or?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to
Roy?
say, oh,
Oops.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say it's almost like Brian's a one-man think tank. I mean, this is really an amazing summary, and I think that really how you put it together in the overview so succinctly, Brian, is really helpful. So I'm very supportive of this, and hope you do get to do an op-ed or a TED talk or something, because I think that this could really be important in the next stages. Thank you.
Thank
Roy?
you.
Yeah, Brian, thank you for the report. If I could put you on the spot, could I, taking you up on your theme of leadership and how the strength of leadership of the T has uh, changed over the years, what's your view of where the T stands right now? Because my impression is that Philip Eng has been a very good addition to the agency, but do you think that we're heading in the right direction?
Well, I've publicly said that he's the best GM I've seen in the last 20 years. I would go back to Dan Grabowskis as probably the next closest one at his level. Um, Phil is the real deal. He's a pro. He does this for a living and he gets it. And I think the proof is there. I have praised the governor extensively for hiring him. Um, and I think he's the right man for the job right now. I was at an event when Ed Markey referred to him as a first round draft pick, and I think that's accurate. So I think Phil is the right person for the job right now, and it's not just Phil Eng, it's the folks he's bringing with him, and I say that not just meaning the folks he's brought up from New York with him, the Dennis Varneys and people like that, but I see him bringing up the next sort of generation of leadership. I see him grooming folks like Ryan Caholen and Lindsay Heffernan, and if you watch him, and I watch him pretty closely, you can just see what he's doing and trying to bring along the next generation because we all know he won't be here forever. And I think he's trying to groom his successors and put in the right structures in place that we don't have to go back to the way it was. And I give him credit. And one of the arguments that I've also made, not to belabor this, is that Phil is someone who has shown, in my opinion, that if you invest in him, you get results. And that hasn't not always been the case around here. Um, I think if the society, the Commonwealth invests in Phil Ang, you will get results and you will get what you pay for. And I think that's I'm not to say that other GMs haven't been like that. There certainly have been, but just in total, I think he's the right person for the time.
Tom, review.
Thanks. So Brian, I was having similar issues accessing that link. So if you could share with me, that would be great. So I could review in more detail. It sounds great at first glance, but one question I did have, you mentioned one of the 9 lessons learned after this historical view is the importance of the advisory board. having that sort of third party neutral role in providing guidance and advice to the T. So what do you see as, aside from the need for more funding, which sounds like it's kind of undergirding the whole report, but what are some other critical roles we can play, let's say in the next year as a board?
Sure, Tom. Good question. So, if there is going to be a public policy piece of any sort of fix for the T in the short term in 2025, and I've been arguing publicly and in many places that there needs to be, because the service cuts and fare increases that would need to come would be sort of insane. Um, that if there is a public policy piece of this, I would like to see the advisory board get some, if not all, of its sort of former powers and authority back. There have been talks. So some of the folks who've been here for a while might remember up until '09, we had a sort of a line item veto over MBTA operating spending and significantly more statutory authority over its infrastructure spending. And while I'm not sure we're ever going to get directly analogous to that or get directly back to that, I do think there's an important role for groups like ours to play. Um, Again, because we don't work for the executive branch or the legislative branch. We're clearly dependent on them and clearly work very closely with them. But I think there is something to be said for that sort of that independent voice that can represent folks. I mean, cities and towns are putting almost $200 million on the table, which is a lot of money. It's a lot of money that your municipalities could certainly use, I know, inside your own borders. So I would like to see some kind of an increase in our statutory authority. I hope to be at the table when that's getting discussed, and that's another reason why I'm sort of putting this forward today.
The good mayor of Taunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I wasn't able to read the whole report, but I was able to read a decent portion of it. And I think, talking about a multi-pronged approach is where the conversation needs to go. And identifying, all the failures was helpful. I was glad to see that you had, a portion in there that talks about the 2009 and the 2004 reforms that really were not, I guess, as well, I guess I'll put it in the other sense that kind of were a failure. So, and I think you also mentioned the Pioneer Institute in the report and some of the work that they have done. And I think that's really a good resource
Yes.
to understand a lot of the, facts and circumstances that lead us to where we are. Some difficult decisions are going to have to be made. And I think part of, looking at the Pioneer Institute research is going to be helpful, and talking about, a multitude of things, including, benefits and things like that, that really cost, just enormous amount of money as we move forward in this conversation. And Brian, you also mentioned you'll move on to your next step, and I'm just not sure what that is.
Oh, Your Honor, thank you for those comments. And yes, I did get to cite some of the work of the Pioneer folks. They do great work. While I might not always agree with their outcomes, I certainly appreciate their efforts and they do very, very rigorous research. So I'd like to turn this into an op-ed, hopefully get it published. I've been in discussions with folks at WBUR about doing a 3-part radio series on it, kind of on the history of how the T got to where it's at. That is something I'm in negotiations with. The BUR folks folks might know of has gone through some changes, but I'm still hoping that can happen kind of in the December, January timeframe. And then I'm going to provide this to the task force, ask that it be sort of entered into the official record. And I'm just going to start talking about it and start talking about the lessons that we can all learn. And again, um, it's pretty easy to repeat. I don't want to call them mistakes, and I want to be very honest about 2004, 2009. The folks that that wrote those laws had the best of intentions, and the folks with forward funding had the best of intentions. It just didn't work out for a variety of reasons that folks did not foresee. I don't think there have been many instances over the course of the last century where sort of vindictive or punishments have been sort of metered out at public transportation agencies purposefully to harm them. I'm not saying there have never been those, but I do think folks go into this with the best of intentions. I just want everyone to be aware of what's been tried in the past, and maybe that can help in the debate about not repeating things that we've already tried. I just don't think they'll work again. But again, nobody elected me to anything, so it's easy for me to say.
Aaron?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So, Brian, I just want to agree with you in terms of Phil Eng and the leadership that he's brought to the table and some of the folks that he brought with him. And I do hope that he has the time and the capacity to actually make change throughout the organization. So even if we're seeing some of it at the top, this is a huge organization with some very deep-seated institutional problems, sort of through the union and some past practices. So I think just sort of keeping that in mind, that it is like turning an enormous ship. And so hopefully we will, see changes that'll last. My comment, Brian, is you're, going throughout the Commonwealth and having meetings with the T is sort of just honing in on, they did a master plan and really focused on T infrastructure, MBTA employees and riders, and what they were missing was cities and towns. Like, we are partners with the MBTA. It's land use. It's certainly the riders in our municipalities, but it's also the non-riders as well. And so it's sort of part of the whole ecosystem of the MBTA, functioning, I think, in the Commonwealth. So I think it really is important to keep reminding the T that we, the municipalities, the cities and towns, are their partners and want to be working with them, I think, more proactively and less reactively in the future.
Absolutely, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Anybody else? If I can add to that, obviously I represent this board to the board of directors, and I took on the role of chair of the subcommittee in compensation and working with all the unions settling contracts. And though we were challenged economically because of all the T shutdown and the COVID and the revenue challenges, on the other side of the coin is we had to come up with more aggressive contracts to fill positions that couldn't be filled otherwise. So there's that dynamic that we're living in. As mayor, I'm sure other mayors probably share some of this as well. Filling certain positions at the local level getting more difficult. I wonder in 10 years who's going to be plowing the streets, trying to get CDL drivers, et cetera, et cetera. So there's the challenge of getting appropriate personnel for those positions, which actually drove the costs up even more during this time. I will echo several of your remarks as far as Phil Eng goes. I've been around a long time, and I find his leadership refreshing. When the governor appointed him, I was, impressed with the resume, but I hadn't quite experienced firsthand his leadership skills and management abilities. And I think he's been absolutely extraordinary. And I say refreshing because, when these issues have popped up, and he has had many that just come out of nowhere, he doesn't BS it. He tells you exactly what happened, what it needs to be fixed, and how long it's going to take. And I think the public has responded to that. There wasn't that old political spin. You can't tell them this, you can't say this. No, he hits it head on, and then resolves it. I think that's pretty remarkable in this day and age. And we have a railroad guy running the railroad. How novel is that, right? It is a big agency. It's an old bureaucracy. I'm still frustrated with certain aspects of it and trying to get development going around the T stations and all. It's still a major challenge. There's not enough, and I've said this to him, there's not enough decision makers in that agency. It goes back and forth between real estate and finance and outside firms looking at things. So there's a ways to go, but I think he's done a remarkable job to date. And he's the right guy at the right time because of all the issues we've had with the systemic failures that he's been able to attack. So I'll say that.
Mr.
Lastly, what
Mayor?
I'd like to say is go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sorry, I didn't thought you were finished.
If I might just finish up, I do think we should accept the report. I do want to caution Brian that before you get out and push certain policies, I think that would have to be something the board should sanction before you do that. But I think it's certainly fair and probably the right thing to do, get out and talk about the report, the history. It is what it is, and I think a lot of people will learn a lot from this report, and I appreciate the work done on it. So go ahead, Chris.
So out of this whole group, I may be more of a blue collar, so to speak, and I'm also a railroader. And I've had some ability to spend some time with Phil recently, basically one-on-one. And I think he's been a refreshing addition, and I sincerely hope that he is able to stay as long as he as long as he wants to stay. He's got a great attitude about things. He likes to see things done correctly in the right way versus put his head in the proverbial sand pile. And the other thing that's happening right now that you folks may not see is there is a I don't know what the right word is, but there is a there's a lot of mid-level management and others that are leaving the T because they're being called to task. And that is a very important distinction because they're being called to task to actually show up and do their work and be responsible and I think that's a huge, from the outside. I'm not really from the outside looking in because I actually work with all these guys. I work with a lot of them, and I hear them complaining about all of it and that they have to do this and that, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. I something I haven't seen in any of the time I've been, following this. So I think it's a great thing. I know Ryan. Brian knows I know Ryan very well and work with these guys on a daily basis. So I really think it's a refreshing step.
Let me add one comment. Some of you probably know there's a new chairman of the MBTA Board of Directors now in Tom McGee, former mayor of Lynn and longtime legislative chair of transportation. I think that is going to pay dividends, literally, with his relationship with the legislature to help come up with that solution coming out of the task force and see what the recommendations are going to be. So I think we're in a good place right now. And just to remind everybody, I am your representative on that board of directors. So if there's a time when you guys feel strongly about a certain issue and as a group want me to vote a certain way, that's my role. So don't be shy. I can't represent every individual community on their personal opinions on things, but if we come together as a board on a particular item or issue, I'm your vote. So and your voice. So just a reminder of that. I see Matt's got his hand up. Matt.
Thank you, Barry Koch. So not to keep piling praise on Phil Eng, but I'm going to continue on that train for a second. So when he was first appointed, and this is just an anecdote, I looked his name up because I had never heard of him either. And the first thing I found was a New York Post article with a glowing sort of piece about him when he was retiring from the Long Island Railroad. If you know the New York Post, they don't write glowing pieces about anybody, so that said something, right? And, just with all of the T folks, the T staff that I've interacted with, the people he's appointed to positions, Ryan Cohalan being one, the people have been talking about, the mid-level staff who have been promoted, who have been able to get work done, frankly. I think just speak volumes to his leadership and, looking at the slow zones, right, going from several hundred to 4, I believe we're at right now. Another huge milestone. So yeah, a lot of praise for him and his leadership.
Leonard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'll add to that, that the alignment from the governor, to the Speaker of the House, to the Senate President, to the Secretary of Transportation is also very helpful. As Brian said, it's all about leadership. And I've been around a while too, and it's been a while. I can't remember seeing such good alignment. I think a lot of history has led to that. A lot of recent history has led to that. But but all of those folks, get credit, and so do a lot of our legislators, and the unity of this board. We realize that we have to work together, and there's very little, or I should say, no, like the selfishness, and that's going to bode well for the whole system. Thank you.
Okay, about a half hour in, everybody good? So maybe we'll take a motion to accept Mr. Cain's report. We have a motion? Don't be shy.
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Clint. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, the ayes have it. Those who had not had a chance to read it thoroughly, when you do that and you've got any comments or questions, certainly reach out to Brian or myself, and we can take it from there. But I think we have an understanding now that Brian is free to go out and talk about the report, short of suggesting certain policies. Brian, just be careful on that aspect of it. With that, we'll go to the next item.
Sir, could I
Committee
request
updates?
that we could
Sure.
I just request we go to item F instead of item E? Hannah Swidltowski has some time constraints, if you don't mind, sir.
Anybody have an objection to that? Seeing none, we'll go to item F.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to present this morning. In case you don't know me, I'm Hannah, Brian's deputy director, and we've been spending much of this fall visiting many of our communities, and we're still on the road traveling almost on a weekly basis. Thus far, we've been to approximately 24 communities, and I know it's actually a little bit higher because Brian has also been to some on his own. And we've been really spending time anywhere from 30 minutes, honestly, up to an hour, sometimes even longer, talking about what the advisory board is, what we do, and really listening also to each community. Some of you we've actually already met with. So spending time hearing, what is on your mind in terms of transportation, what should we be doing? How can we best support your communities as a whole? Thank you. Isabella has put up some slides of our various visits that we keep doing. And it's also been really great to hear the common thread and the common theme that thus far, it was even mentioned on this meeting earlier about Phil Eng and how everyone has trust in him, and everyone thus far has been very pleasantly surprised with the way that the MBTA leadership is trending in the right direction. And so that's been very reassuring to hear that everyone is sort of on board with this. And at the end of most of our meetings, almost every community has said, tell us how we can help you in fixing the T, in advocating to our state reps and senators. Isabella helped me to put together the toolkit, which you also are aware of, with letters to representatives and senators asking for this to really become a top 5, really a top 3 priority in the next session. The other thing that we have been doing recently is we've been having many legislative meetings continuing, and these legislative meetings have been very productive as well. Last week, we actually met with Representative Chicolo, for example, and she was very passionate about how can I best support the advisory board, whether it's partnering with us. Brian's going to work maybe with a grouping of you and some municipal leaders to figure out, should we be filing any legislation? Should we be partnering on transportation matters to really highlight the advisory board and emphasize our role in the community? So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to update. And as always, please feel free to reach out. And we are trying to get to as many communities as possible. This map highlights most of the communities that we've hit thus far. And we're going to take a break probably mid-December and pick back up in the spring. But we definitely, our goal is to try to hit all 178 communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Hannah. And I know that Brian, I know we started doing that early on. We got to a number of communities, but that the schedule is just hectic and trying to line everything up. So I'm thrilled that you and Hannah continue that tradition. I think it's important because we talk about the big issues here, but when you're out in the ground in those communities, you get to see some of those issues that may not seem so important on the big picture, but they're very important to those local communities. So appreciate the work on that. Anybody have questions on Hannah or Brian on that? Okay, so we'll return to item C, committee updates. Who's up first?
Thank you,
So,
Chair.
Isabella will give a brief overview, and then if you want to go to committees, you can, sir. Committee chairs, you can.
Okay, we'll go the up. Let's go, Isabel.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. If we haven't been introduced yet, hi, my name is Isabella, and I just joined the advisory board in the summer, so I'm really looking forward to working more with you all. Since this committee's last meeting, 3 advisory board committees have met: climate and clean energy in October, and then commuter rail and rapid transit this month. And Brian, do you want me to talk about the meetings, or do you want the committee chairs to, or?
Why don't you give a brief overview, and then if the chairs want to add to it, they can.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. So in October, Kat Eschel, who's the director of the MBTA's new Office of Climate and Resiliency Policy and Planning, joined to present the MBTA's climate assessment, which was just published in September, and reviews the MBTA's existing policies and shares recommendations to guide her office's work to produce a more sustainable and a more resilient system. Last week, MBTA and Keolis officials joined the Commuter Rail Committee for their quarterly update on ridership and performance. They announced that commuter rail ridership has returned to around 95% of pre-pandemic levels, and on-time performance for the month of October was around 88% on time, which is a little lower than normal, which they attributed to what they call slippery season, which is a lot of leaves on the track, as well as weather changes. They also discussed upcoming schedule changes on the Worcester line, and then took questions from our members. And then finally this week, Jen Prescott, who is the Senior Director of the Office of Performance Management and Innovation at the MBTA, joined to present proposed changes to the MBTA's service delivery policy, which they are required to do under the state law's mandate for the advisory board. These changes included new criteria for bus stop and ferry dock accessibility. They included crowding as a measure of comfort for the first time, and adopted new standards for on-time performance that considers wait times and travel times. The MBTA staff took questions after the presentation, and the Rapid Transit Committee will prepare a brief response to the policy changes with the committee's comments. And that's all for our committee update. Thank you.
And if I could just highlight the commuter rail just briefly, we've been very active lately, and one thing I just wanted to point out, we did meet July and September and November, but we did have kind of an issue with membership attendance, so I just want to put in a plug for folks who may be interested or have a designee to join us on the commuter rail committee. We do have a unique opportunity because we get visited by Mike Muller, who runs commuter rail for the T, and Abdallah Chaja, who of course is the Keolis CEO. So it's our opportunity to talk directly with the folks who run it. So, I just put in a plug for membership for that. And thank you, Isabella, for the summary. The one thing I would add that earlier, I don't know if we talked about, we did get a long, thorough presentation on safety on commuter rail, which involved both accidental death and suicides, of course, and trespassing issues. So that was an important update as well that we got earlier in the year. So, and we're looking at taking on in the future, of course, the RFP for commuter rail is scheduled to come out, I guess, over the next year, and will be renewed or will be put out to bid. So we're starting to look at that. So that's an important big change coming up. It affects who's going to be running commuter rail for the T. So that's just a brief update of what we've been doing on commuter rail. And the other thing is electrification. We do get presentations as well on sustainability and electrification, which is another important aspect of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Isabella. Any other committee chairs have anything to add? Okay, great, excellent. Next up, I guess we're going to the task force update, Brian.
Yes, sir. Just a brief update to let folks know that we're in the home stretch on the task force. I mentioned it earlier. I think we have two more meetings before we get to the final document, which will be delivered, I'm told, at 11:59 on New Year's Eve to Her Excellency the Governor. But we will meet the deadline. It's looking now like it'll be broken out as a short, medium, and long term kind of program with sort of getting to the T's acute needs for 2025 sort of handled first, and then some longer term recommendations for how the broader infrastructure of the Commonwealth, which needs significant investment, can be sort of tackled, at least policy recommendations for it. And as I mentioned before, just to let everyone know, I continue to strongly advocate for additional Chapter 90 money as free cash for cities and towns to spend, because you folks know your communities certainly better than anyone else. So. Happy to share any documents anybody would like to see or give more details if folks are interested in that, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Any comment on that? Again, we don't have to wait for meetings. Anybody want to have a discussion with Brian about some of these issues? He's always available. Feel free to give him a shout. Thank you, Brian. You've been doing yeoman's work over the last year, and we truly appreciate that. Um, Next item is old business or new business. Next meeting. We picking a meeting date yet, Brian? Or
Yes, sir. We have our sort of annual general meeting in December, and of course I had it right in front of me, and now I can't find it. Um, but that'll be the meeting
get
where
that out.
I know, huh? Well, that'll be the meeting where we approve the budget for the next year. We're on a calendar year basis, and we'll elect committees. And just to echo what Rob Shearer said, if you are interested in serving on a committee, that's where a lot of the work of this organization takes place. And I'm very grateful to Rob and all the other committee chairs for the hard work they do. We've done a lot of work this year in committees, and there's more to do. So please, if you're interested in seeing what the time commitment is, let me know. We never meet for more than an hour, as you know, and it's 3 or 4 times a year on Zoom. So I think we can maximize the use of your time.
Okay. Just a couple of comments before I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. One is, Brian, I think we ought to be working on a kind of a marketing pack of tools, if you will. I think things are going to start happening quickly as far as recommendations coming out of the task force, what the sense of the legislature is going to be. And each of you on this board are very important representatives going back to your town, respective cities and towns, on helping to get the word out and getting the right information out and building that coalition to really get legislative change. So I think that's something we really should get into after the first of the year, what the strategy will be on that. And I plan on going directly to my city council and just speaking about the T, what needs to happen for us to be where we want to be for the next decade. So I think that's something we could probably work on the side, Brian. And
Absolutely.
with that, anything else? If not, I'm sorry, Matt from Boston.
Thank you, Mayor. So one quick thing I wanted to note, and I apologize for missing the opportunity to talk about this earlier, but Brian, I don't think we've talked about this yet. We met on Wednesday for the Advisory Board Rapid Transit Committee, talked with the MBTA about the new service delivery policy, and I think it was overall pretty well received from the Rapid Transit Committee. There were certain elements that we still have some questions about, but by and large, I think there's a lot of praise and support for the new policy. It included some very minor things like changing some terms and definitions, like commuter rail becomes regional rail, uh, key bus route becomes frequent bus route, to more substantive changes for how the MBTA measures its service and service delivery, to reflect better what we believe would be the passenger experience. So the Rapid Transit Committee is proposing to put together a letter that will detail out those changes and talk about our support, and then some, again, very, very, very minor misgivings that we still have about the service delivery policy. And I believe we're going to show it or send it out to this team when that letter is ready. So just to flag that, apologies for not mentioning it earlier.
Thank you, Matt. Roy?
Yeah, Mayor Cook, I wondered if I could ask you to do a favor for the entire committee, which is when Brian and the group came out to Belmont the other day, we had talked about Belmont putting together a letter addressed to our state legislators, but I wondered if you're going to do something similar, say starting in Quincy, if you could actually share your letter with the group so we could have maybe a template as a starting point.
Be happy to, sure.
Recognizing every town is going to approach this a little differently, but I think it'd be a good idea to have a common starting point.
Absolutely. We'll definitely follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
We have stuff
Okay.
too, we'll share, Mike.
Very good. Anything else?
The
Well,
next meeting is
let's,
December 12th, sir. December 12th.
December the 12th. Okay. We'll note that, but you'll get a reminder for that. And it's that time of year, so I know it's coming on quickly, the holiday season. I certainly want to wish you and all your loved ones a happy Thanksgiving. And on this time of year, just coming off of Veterans Day, let's be mindful of those who don the uniform from all of our cities and towns, keeping the peace around the world. So I wish everybody the best this holiday season. With that, accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn. Rob,
Okay.
sure.
Motion in a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Excellent. We are adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.